Hey there, hi there, ho there, and welcome to the next best episode of Welcome to the New You. I'm Larry Green. I am the executive director and host of this podcast. And I'm joined today by Hannah. And we're going to introduce her in just a little while, but a little bit more about who we are and what we do over here. We are the Gainesville Community Counseling Center, and we are a nonprofit center that offers free and reduced rates for people in the community who need mental health counseling, dealing with just about anything you can think of. Our phone number is 352-448-9120. And you can find us on the interwebs at www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com. So one of the reasons we do this podcast is because we like to put resources and information out into the hands of the community. We like to give you opportunities to learn about mental health in general and what is available in and around Gainesville, and if we don't have it available in Gainesville, what's available nationally. And so we will come to you weekly, right, Lexi? Weekly?
Bi-weekly.
When are we going weekly? Lexi always bursts my bubble. Anyway, so we'll talk about things like relationships and how to have a healthy relationship. We'll talk about how to deal with conflict. We'll deal with issues related to sexuality and gender identity and how to be a supportive person for people walking through that transition. And any other questions that may arise, you can email us questions at office@GainesvilleCommunityCounselingCenter.com, and we will be happy to answer those if and when you give them to us. Good. So today, we are here with Hannah, and Hannah is going to talk with us a little bit about a wonderful resource that we have here in the Gainesville community, and it's the Crisis Counseling Center, right?
Alachua County Crisis Center.
Alachua County Crisis Center. And where are y'all located?
So we are actually housed within the Alachua County Health Department building, the same building, but we're on the left side where all of the community support services are. So we're technically under the umbrella of community support with housing, social services, veteran services, foster grandparent program, the victim services and rape crisis center, and then we're also there too. So
good. So I used to volunteer once a week at the health department, and I did free counseling there. So when you go into the main waiting room, your first door on the left or second door on the left?
Correct. Yeah, the glass doors are the lobby of community support. So.
Good. Fantastic. So before we get into the work that you do, tell me a little bit about you and how long you've been there and what your role is.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
So I have actually started volunteering at the center as a phone crisis counselor 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
In January of 2012, and I was just going into graduate school to become a counselor, and that was, I was told that was a great experience for somebody who wanted to be in the mental health field.
Sure.
So we have a pretty extensive phone training, counselor training program that lasts about 7 weeks. So I started as a phone counselor, and then I moved on to other roles and finished out grad school, took some time to raise a couple kids. I was a stay-at-home mom for a little bit, and then did some substance use counseling, and now I've just last year, about a year ago, came back on as staff, and I've been in a couple roles since then, both as a mobile response team, which is going out and helping folks 25 and younger with suicide prevention,
right.
And safety planning, things like that. And then now, since February, I've been the projects coordinator, which is not very specific, but I oversee our care team, our mobile response, and also crisis intervention training for law enforcement.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the mobile response program. What is that?
So there's many different facets to it nowadays. The center has been around since 1969. And it started out mostly as just the crisis hotline.
Right.
And then over time we've built on that, and we've always had what we call care team, which is a lot of times requested by law enforcement in the community. If they're out on a scene, either something that's very traumatic or tragedy, traffic accidents, unexpected deaths, sometimes death by suicide,
Right.
Things that people are just, it's very fresh. It's emotional first aid, grief work.
Sure.
On scene. So we send 2 people out. We call it's called a team, but it's usually 2 individuals.
Sure.
Unless there's a big crowd, and we can send out more. A combination of volunteers and staff. So once volunteers have been on the phones for a while, they can move up into that care team role, and they can be involved in mobile response. So we do. We respond. We do a lot of just crisis intervention in the moment, and then we provide resources for, like, we can do free counseling ongoing for anyone who lives in Alachua County.
Right.
I think we're kind of like one of the best kept secrets in Gainesville because of, it doesn't matter if you have insurance, it doesn't matter if you can pay. Like you guys, we want to provide that service to our community. So we usually hand out our cards with our crisis line number on it, which is 24/7, 365, and it has been since the late 60s. And so there's the care team. There's also the mobile response team, and we are the provider for this particular county, and that's abbreviated as MRT. So that's grant funded, and it came about after the Parkland shooting. To address mental health concerns for young people in the community. So it's prevention of either suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation,
Sure.
anything, self-harm, things that the targeted age group right now is 25 and younger. And those usually, when we go out, they can be initiated by family, parents, caregivers, but most of the time they're initiated by school counselors. So we work really closely with the school resource officers and the school counselors and school admin in the county.
Sure.
If they have a student that they're worried about, and we go out and we do our assessment. And the goal of a lot of this mobile response is to prevent unnecessary hospitalization.
Yeah.
So if people are familiar with the Baker Act, so that's an involuntary commitment to the hospital to protect someone. But we like to see if we can mobilize their resources that they have in place. We can safety plan with them. We can recruit family members
Support
or other
systems,
support.
right.
Exactly. And try to manage in a less. Sometimes those Baker Acts can be traumatic. So if we don't have to go to that level, then we try to see what else we can do.
Yeah.
And connect them with other resources. Provide referrals. We always do follow-up, check in on people, see how they're doing. So that's the care team and MRT teams. Those are both part of what we do.
Yeah. Now, is the MRT, are they? I know that there is a group that goes out with law enforcement, but that's through Meridian, right? That Meridian has, or I think it's Meridian has therapists or counselors on staff with
Law enforcement.
GPD.
So that's a whole different thing. So this is it's interesting you bring that up because we now are working really closely with these co-responder teams in the community. So
that's y'all.
So it's not us, but we sometimes we show up at to the same scene.
Things, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the co-responder program is relatively new, I want to say, but Gainesville Police Department has 3 teams, so they have 3 officers that ride with 3 counselors or therapists, and I think Alachua Sheriff's Office also has 1 team, and now University of Florida has a co-responder team. So that's a law enforcement officer and a mental health professional riding the same car, and they go out to calls like similar to what we would, but if there's an element of violence or danger or something like that we wouldn't feel equipped to handle, that's more of a co-responder team. And we tell people sometimes on the crisis line, like if you have concerns about someone, they may be experiencing psychosis or they may not, be safe, that when you call dispatch, you can request one of these co-responder teams.
Now, are they available, because you said GPD has, you think, 3 teams. Does that mean they're available 24/7?
So they're not quite. The aim is to hire more teams, and they will be around the clock. They have like an early morning to afternoon shift, and then they have another team that comes on in the afternoon to late in the evening. So it's not quite 24 hours yet. But we're 24 hours with the mobile response. And so if it's, oftentimes it will be self-referral. So a client will call the hotline, and they may not have social support. They may be very alone. And if they're local, if they're within Alachua, we're limited to the county. So if someone's within Alachua County and they need it, we feel like a face-to-face response would be more appropriate or more helpful, then we sometimes dispatch our care team to go and be with someone, sit with someone. So
okay. So how often, I don't need specific numbers, is that something that is frequently done, that y'all send out the teams into the community? We do.
Our staff, we share on call, so each of us or a lot of us have a day during the week or a 24-hour period where we're on call, and I would say it's not uncommon to get about average of 1 or sometimes 2. Sometimes, I mean, it just ebbs and flows.
Day,
it depends on. We've done days where you get 3 care teams in one day.
Wow!
But I would say we do a fair bit of mobile response.
What are some of the things are some of the themes that you're experiencing at your location as far as challenges that folks are having? I mean, I know it's difficult to say, it's this, and this, but because there's a whole system behind what's motivating you. But what are some of the more common things that y'all experience?
Well, people do come to us specifically a lot because they learn of us when they're in a crisis. So sometimes even when that crisis is past, they might still be in a transitional period of their life. Either they've lost a loved one, or they're dealing with substance use, or they are working through some other type of grief. We've seen couples just for relationship stuff. We see individuals. We work with a lot of folks that have had past trauma. But we don't, because we don't take insurance, we don't have to diagnose. And so we work from a very client-centered model. And so it's just attending to those immediate, person-centered needs. What's going on for you right now? How can we help you? So really just about anything.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, folks get into a position where they just feel overwhelmed by a number of things.
Right.
And they get to a point sometimes where they can't see a path out.
Right. That's basically, the definition of crisis is when your pressures outweigh your assets.
Right.
Whatever the situation you're in, it can happen to anybody at any time, but it's just when that balance beam gets tipped to the other direction where, a lot of my tools cannot handle this particular situation. I'm overwhelmed.
Right. Which is much more common than people think.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's nice to know that y'all are there 24/7. How would somebody get in touch with y'all?
So that crisis line, we have a local crisis line, and I can give you that number now and again later too, but it's 352-264-6789. Okay. And that is our local line. We also happen to be a 988 center, so I don't know if...
You can say a little bit, because that's relatively new, right?
It is new. So the Crisis Center has always answered, for quite a while, we've answered the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And that number is like 1-800-273-8255, which is great if you have it right in front of you.
Not so great.
Not so great if you're in crisis or you're feeling suicidal and you can't remember that giant number. So recently, I think in July, they rolled out a shortcut. You dial 911 in an emergency where you need law enforcement or EMS. This is mental health and suicide crisis shortcut number. So 988. Which is why if you notice, there's no more local dialing. You have to dial an area code and a number. because of 988. So it's nationwide.
Okay.
And
I was wondering why all of a sudden we had to dial that.
exactly.
I didn't realize they were linked.
Because there's a 988 area code.
Oh, right.
And so, yeah, they've had to switch things up. So, because that if it works now. I was going to say, if you dial 988 on your cell phone, that actually forwards to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Okay.
So we are one of the Lifeline centers, and of course they're all over the state, all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the lines that we answer in our phone room.
Okay.
And
So if somebody does that 988, they dial in, it'll come to y'all?
So right now it is by area code, which is not. It's unfortunate because eventually they're hoping to go to geolocation, so where someone actually is physically located,
Right.
rather than area code. Because see, like I grew up in a different state and I still have that area code.
Yeah.
Mine would be forwarded to that center in the other state, and we get folks who used to live in Gainesville, have a 352, but they are now elsewhere, and it comes to us because of the area code. So it's eventually going to be more geolocated,
Which would make sense.
which would make sense. And it's still, I was going to say, there's still kinks and bugs that they're working out, but eventually it would ideally be, the center that's actually closest to you.
Yeah.
But if you do have a 352, the odds are that your call would be forwarded to us. And then we have, of course, backup centers in different counties that are surrounding Alachua. So, but yeah, so that's another 24/7 shortcut. I was going to say, if you don't remember the local number, and it's also important to remember, because I think some people call and they're saying, I'm not suicidal. Is it okay that I'm calling? Absolutely, it's mental health and crisis. And
Well, I think that's been the stigma. Like, if I call this number, it's because I'm suicidal or need a greater deal of care. Where no, if you're overloaded, or if you just need somebody to listen, right, and you find yourself getting worked up and you don't have anybody around you,
or it's 3 o'clock in the morning, everyone's asleep,
right, and so rather than let that stuff sit in and let it fester, let's go ahead and talk about it.
For sure. And so, that's normal. I was going to say what to expect if you do dial 988. The call taker will ask, like, have you had thoughts about suicide, or are you thinking about killing yourself, things like that, because we do screen all the calls. But that does not mean that it's not appropriate for you to call, even if you're just, not just, but if you're having a crisis or you just need some support.
Right. Yeah. So, September is the month we set aside, right, for bringing awareness to suicide prevention.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you all on, for this month. Not that that's all y'all do, but I would say that y'all probably encounter suicidality at a much higher rate than a lot of other providers. Mm-hmm. So we use that term, suicidal ideation.
Correct.
How do you define that, and what does that look like?
Right. So, like many things in mental health, it's a huge spectrum. And I think that's one of the major things that we train our call takers, our volunteers on the hotline to recognize, is that it runs the gamut from, yes, sometimes thoughts about suicide pop up, but I don't have any intent to act on them. I don't have a plan. I don't know method or have the means, all the way to I literally cannot stand this pain another second, and I would rather be dead, and I'm going to take action to make that happen.
Sure.
And there's everything in between.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of education and about assessment, and are really cautious and specific, because I think people who do call, who've experienced suicidal thoughts, are afraid that if I call, does that mean that I'm immediately going to be hospitalized? Just having these thoughts, does that mean that I will, then be involuntarily, committed to the hospital?
Right.
And so that's why, that's a major part of what we do on the lines is, okay, so tell me about these thoughts you're having. How often do they come up? And do you have a plan? We'll usually ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you have a plan about how you would kill yourself? And if you do you have those means, or do you have a time frame? Do you know when you might try to do that? And just to get more specific, so we can pin down what level of danger someone's
Sure.
in. And then we kind of weigh out what what are their support systems like, what are their coping mechanisms like, what usually helps when you're feeling this way. And so that can make the difference, just trying to de-escalate someone's emotions, finding out exactly how severe that suicidal ideation might be, and then trying to see how we can help. And then a lot of times a call will de-escalate quite a bit, and someone feels heard and someone feels validated. We always talk about, okay, so tell me, we know that suicide is rooted in pain, so what's going on? Tell me your reasons for wanting to die. Where's all this pain? And how did it get this way? So we talk about that. And then if someone feels comfortable and they're in a spot where they can talk about reasons for wanting to live, or support that they have, coping that they can engage in, and then sometimes it's like, hey, it sounds like you're in a better place now. Would you promise to call us back if you're thinking about suicide again, if you're thinking about acting on those thoughts? And a lot of times the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of letting people know that, hey, we're here all the time. Please
Just
give us a
because
call.
you call doesn't mean you're going to end up being Baker acted or have the police show up at your door.
Exactly.
Or the MRT showing up to do an assessment.
Right. And so we like to place, power and control and as much as we can in the client's hands, and because they're the expert on that. That's their lived experience. They've been living with this for however long.
Yeah.
So we try to just remind them of the tools and things that they can lean on.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're always honest with people about, okay, this sounds like you're really in danger. And,
Right.
and of course, when necessary, we have called. I mean, sometimes, like I said, at the fast end of that spectrum, someone will call us when they've already taken some type of action.
Right. And you don't have a choice.
And then we have to send law enforcement, right? So, but yeah, we try to, as much as we can, work with people, meet them where they are, and try to figure out what would be most helpful for them.
So part of what I think might be helpful also is, helping people kind of identify some signs that a loved one or a neighbor or a friend may be contemplating suicide as an answer, as a solution.
Right.
So what are some things that, the untrained people,
Sure,
right, who are trained in life, right? What could they be looking out for?
Right. So, I think one of the misconceptions is that depression and suicide always go hand in hand,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not necessarily true.
Right.
But it could be. Someone could be experiencing symptoms of depression. They could be losing interest in the things they normally like to do. They could be isolating, sleeping more or sleeping less than usual, changes in appetite, eating more, eating less. They could be some of the behaviors. Sometimes people will start preparing for them not to be alive anymore. They will start giving away prized possessions or making plans. Well, who's going to keep my dog if I'm not here?
Right.
Planning for a future without themselves in it. And that's concerning for us. Sometimes it could be after a trauma, major trauma, so the loss of a loved one or the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship.
Right.
Major life transitions can trigger thoughts about suicide. And I think that, just whatever is out of someone's usual norm, if you know someone really well and they haven't been themselves, a lot of times people will come out and say it. And I think that there's some stigma and there's some taboo about talking about suicide. One of the most harmful myths about suicide is that talking about it is going to make it more likely to happen. And that's absolutely not true. And so people will flat out say, I just don't know if I can do this anymore.
Right.
Or y'all would be better off without me. Or sometimes I just wish I could go to sleep and not wake up. It's not super direct, but sometimes you hear these thoughts, and if your gut's
I'm just
going,
tired.
Yeah.
Really tired.
I'm super exhausted. I just
I
can't.
don't have the energy for it.
Exactly.
Well, that is one of the difficult things, because when I work with adolescents in particular, and they can sometimes be very emotive and
Sure. And express themselves in that
very,
way.
very much so. Or the other population is the elderly, right? Who have seen most of their friends die, their loved ones have died, and they'll make comments like, I'm just tired of living.
Right.
You know?
Everyone I love is gone.
Right. So what's the purpose?
Right.
So if I'm someone hearing that, you know, what would you recommend that I do or say, or that might help to kind of determine what does that mean and what's going on with you?
Right, and I think it's like exactly what you said, asking that person, what do you mean by that? When you say that, it makes me really worried about you. And even asking what we train on the phones is, it sounds like you're thinking about killing yourself, you know, or are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about ending your life? And we try to steer clear of those euphemisms. Are you thinking about doing something stupid, or
because in their mind it's not stupid.
Right.
Right?
Makes
makes
whole
perfect
lot of
sense.
Yeah, and that's very vague, you know, that
Right.
doesn't, because someone could be throwing these warning signs or, you know, saying phrases like that, and I'm just so tired, and I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And if you go, it sounds like you're thinking about suicide, and they go, oh, no. It's not going to make them go, oh, well, now that you brought it up.
Thanks for that suggestion.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what people are terrified about.
Yeah.
So they don't want to, you know, address it head on because they're so scared that it might plant that seed. But really, I mean, and what we found over and over and over on the hotline is that if you name it and the person's not experiencing it, they just say no. But that actually gives them so much leeway to talk about what is going on.
Sure.
So if this person, if Larry is comfortable enough asking me about suicide, that means I can probably trust him to talk about anything,
Right.
Up to and including that. And so if you're willing to risk that and name it, and just be really honest and genuine with concern, but not in a patronizing or judgy or shamey way, you know, we don't want to go, oh, you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? Like that implies a lot of judgment. But like I said, if we understand that suicide comes from a place of being overwhelmed with the pain that you're in, you know, it's not about being a coward. It's not about taking the quote quote easy way out. It's not, you know, it's not giving up. It's that everyone has a threshold that they can tolerate.
You've reached it.
And that's it.
Right. So asking somebody directly, you know, sounds like you're contemplating suicide. Is that true? That's okay. Right.
Absolutely.
And then is it appropriate if the answer is, you know, I'm thinking about it.
Right.
You know, continuing on and saying, well, what have you thought about?
Right.
Do you have plans? What would you do? And
Right.
those sorts of things.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that feels very awkward.
Right.
And feels very scary.
Super scary and uncomfortable.
Yeah. So one option would be, you can have that conversation with them. The other option might be, would you feel okay if we called Crisis Center?
The crisis center, yeah, and I think we do get a lot of calls from concerned loved ones. You know, my son or daughter or mom or uncle or roommate or whoever has not been themselves, and I'm really worried about them. And we can talk people through how do you want to address it with them. And also we sometimes will offer like, hey, we can give them a call. If you're okay with that, would you like one of us to reach out and check in?
Right.
So either, you know, like you said, we can provide tips on how to talk about suicide with someone you're worried about, or we can follow up with them. But then, if you feel like it's out of your depth, it's too, or you're too close to it, and it's
too scary
or really triggering. If you've dealt with suicidal thoughts yourself, and you know, then it's okay. It sounds like you're thinking about suicide. Who do you trust in your life? Who do you feel safe to talk to about this? And if it's not, if they don't have a therapist or a school counselor or a trusted friend or adult, if they're minor, you know, then the crisis center is a great option.
Good. So you talked a little bit about volunteers and training. So tell me a little bit about ways in which people can become, you know, involved in helping out, and how they would potentially get some training. And
Sure. So we have 3 times a year. We have our volunteer phone training class, and actually the next one starts September 17th
Okay.
of this month, 2022. So that's just next Saturday. But the training program is 7 weeks long.
Every day? Or?
So it starts on a Saturday. The first day is always on a Saturday. And then after that, it's each Tuesday and Thursday evening from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. So it's after work hours. But it is pretty intensive. It's a lot, but it's, I mean, I can say from experience, I learned more about, active listening and paraphrasing, reflecting, feeling, crisis intervention, suicide assessment. I mean, that's been so vital for me in my counseling career, just those basics and skills. So it's quite intensive. But like I said, 7 weeks long, and then people will do observation shifts where they observe other active volunteers on the phones, and then they will have their supervised shifts where we have in-house trainers that will be with the new volunteers as they do their first few shifts, and kind of gradually ease people into it. So we ask for a 6-month commitment after training is finished, and so that's 24 shifts, and that breaks down to, if you do one 4-hour shift a week, that's 6 months.
Okay.
So for 6 months after training, but then a lot of times, like I said, people elect to stay on, and then will join our crisis care team, mobile response, and or the in-house training team, the training team. There's a lot of different roles. We're very volunteer-centered at the Crisis Center. So staff, we view ourselves as mostly support for the volunteers. They're really the heart of what we do. But yeah, people are interested in being involved. They can Google how to volunteer Alachua County Crisis Center, and our website's pretty easy to navigate. There's a link for that. You can fill out an application online, and then our training coordinator, Kevin, will reach out to people and speak with them.
Kevin, just email Kevin.
Just email Kevin. Yeah, our staff contact info is on our website as well.
When Kevin listens to this, he can go, don't tell him to email me.
Right. He's a busy guy. His inbox is full. Yeah. But yeah, so we take applications even up to the week before training if the class isn't full. So if anyone's
is there a particular age cutoff that people need to be mindful of?
We like for folks to be at least, I think it's 18 or 19, and we try to take everybody on a case-by-case basis. And a lot of our volunteers are in undergraduate studies and psychology or social sciences of some sort, but we have pre-med students, we have folks in grad school, we have people who are retired and wanting to get back to the community. So really anybody who has some extra time on their hands, wants to learn about mental health and crisis intervention, we just encourage anybody in the county. And right now we have our physical location in the health department building, but we also a lot of our phone volunteers can work remotely.
Okay.
So they can take calls as long as they have a private space like where they live.
Right.
And so transportation has become less of an issue. All of this used to be only in person, but now we have some remote.
Does the remote nature also apply to the counseling that y'all do for individuals and couples?
Yes, yeah. Our counseling, we have staff who see clients. We also have graduate student interns who are at different graduate programs that they see clients in person and on telehealth. So we are doing some Zoom sessions.
And how would somebody schedule an appointment, for counseling?
Same number. So that crisis hotline number, 352-264-6789 is you can schedule an appointment at 2 o'clock in the morning if you want to.
And there's no limit on how many appointments they can have. They just need to be a resident of Alachua County.
Correct. Yeah. So we work with people and kind of try to figure out, what's the most appropriate, length of treatment. But we aren't bound by, insurance or by number of sessions. We can really just kind of determine what's most appropriate for people.
And if we have non-English speaking folks, do you have opportunities available for them to obtain counseling as well?
We have a few counselors that can speak different languages. But that's
few and far between.
yeah, it's tough. We do the best we can, but we can at the very least see somebody for an intake session and then refer and make sure that they get what they need. But we have worked with a translation line on the hotline, and we have had interpreters who work at the health department come. So we can definitely find ways.
Total aside, but Rural Women's Health Program has set up a group through the Jenny Project. I don't know if you're familiar with that, through the city. And so they've got a language line that they've contracted with. So that's what we're using. Here's like $100 and you only pay for what you need.
Oh, nice.
Which is nice. I mean, you just call that number and they do the translation for you. Which
basically live. Yeah.
Yep, it's live simultaneous. So anyway, that's...
Yeah, we do use that on the hotline for sure. And we have one staff member who's fluent in Spanish, and we have another staff member who speaks Mandarin. So we're also expanding our staff a lot over the next year or so with becoming a 988 center and the
How are y'all funded?
program. So we're actually we used to be completely county funded.
Yeah.
So we still get most of our funds from the county budget, but now that we have the MRT program, the mobile response, and 988, we do have some grant monies for those particular programs.
Are people able to donate, like just a regular Joe Blow, come and donate to the Crisis Center?
Yes, so we actually have an organization called Friends of the Crisis Center, and people can make donations to Friends because we do a lot of our volunteer development support that we get from that organization, that nonprofit. Yes, if anyone's interested.
And what's the Friends?
Friends of the Crisis Center.
Very good.
We also, I was going to say too, one of the other things we provide is there's a Survivors of Suicide Memorial Garden. It's located at Cofran Park, off of 8th Avenue. And so that is a really lovely contemplative spot out in nature that's dedicated to the memory of people who've died by suicide.
And you do an annual...
We have garden work days, the volunteers do a lot, and then we have a vigil annually. We also have, run by one of our longtime volunteers and a staff member, the Survivors of Suicide support group, and that meets twice a month, and right now it's on Zoom. So there's information about the Survivors of Suicide group also on the website.
Yeah.
But that is, I think that is one of the things that people do seek us out for because it is such a specific type of grief.
Sure.
And just talking with other people who have had that same lived experience, knowing someone, loving someone who's died by suicide, I think that people find a lot of solace in that. It's a wonderful group. So.
Yeah. So the question that I always have is, how do y'all hear and see and experience a lot. How do y'all take care of your staff and, kind of balance that compassionate side with the need for self-care? What does that look like for y'all?
Absolutely. I think we could not do the work that we do if we didn't have an amazing, supportive staff to lean on. We have to be very flexible. We rotate on-call weekends, and so, but we're very encouraged by, our other staff members and supervisor, like, hey, if you need time, take time. If you need help, ask for help. You need to process something. We always, there's multiple layers of, like, the phone volunteers, when they're on the phones, they have a consultant that they can call anytime and talk to them about if they're struggling or if they just got hit really hard by a call. And then the consultant is also backed up by staff, and then staff have other staff. And so everyone has someone that they can lean on, talk to, process, and it's, I feel very strongly, like, it's not just words, like when my supervisor says, don't come in, take time off, take a day off.
They mean it.
They mean it, really mean it. It's highly encouraged, and a lot of us, like, I have my own therapist, and I do different things for self-care that are super important, and that is highly encouraged, and really it's vital, because we just can't, like you said, we're experiencing vicarious trauma.
Sure.
We're kind of on the front lines, and just the on-call nature of it's unpredictable. You
Right.
never know, and so it's hard to kind of shift to that just flexible. You never know what's going to happen, but you're just kind of up and ready for anything.
Whatever. Yeah.
But that also means we have to take our self-care really seriously and know when to ask for help.
Well, I think that's a good kind of a segue into the nature of folks who call the line, and society as general. I don't think we do a very good job many times of providing that self-care, right? And just taking a few moments to breathe and to do some mindfulness, maybe go out and exercise, change your diet, those sorts of things, which when you're overloaded,
Right.
becomes even more problematic.
Those things don't feel very accessible. I think, when self-care is like thrown around, it's kind of a buzzword, and people go, oh, well, like, what do you mean, like take a bubble bath? I don't know. People don't know. But for me, like I love to do crafting stuff. So I love to knit and weave and cross stitch and, all of these like things that, or just reading or taking a walk, or it could be petting my dog, or it could be anything and everything that gives you some of those just minutes of mindfulness or
Right.
a little bit
Just
of
fills
a
your
break.
gas tank a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be connecting, or it could be spending time alone. And it's very individual. But it doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to be a beach vacation. But it can be just, like you said, moments here and there throughout the day.
Right.
To step back and take a break, it's different for everyone, but finding out what that is for you, and then trying to actively do that at least a little bit every day.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming and spending some time here. I hope we didn't overload you with...
No, like I said, I could talk about the Crisis Center for quite a while. It feels, now being a part of it for about 10 years, it just feels very much like home to me.
Yeah.
And I do feel very supported, and I'm very passionate about our work and our mission. Like our motto is doing what needs to be done.
Yeah.
So we are very just honored to be a part of the community, and honored to serve our community and have all these lovely community partners and referral networks, because we know we can't do it all, but we can
Right.
at least hook people up with where they need to go. So.
Well, I'm glad that y'all are here. I know the work is difficult, and I appreciate all of the lives that you touch through the phone calls and through the mobile response, and for the ways in which you promote health overall. So thank y'all for sharing your time with us, and I hope if there's anything we can ever do for y'all, we're happy to do it. I don't have any money to give you.
Oh my gosh, no, this is...
I can reach out to the friends of the Crisis Center
right.
later on when I hit the lottery.
Well, just being able to promote our volunteering is like
That's huge.
It does a lot.
Because it sounds like a lot of what y'all do is volunteer.
Absolutely, we try to prioritize having volunteers on the phones because it's such a rich experience for them as well.
Yeah. So give me that number one more time to call and schedule an appointment, or to get in touch with y'all.
Sure, it's 352-264-6789.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you for coming and being a part of this. Once again, we are the Gainesville Community Counseling Center, and you can reach us at 352-448-9120 or on the interwebs at www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com. And feel free to visit our one and only sponsor for the program. What is it, Lexi? PleasurePoints.shop for all your adult pleasures. And catch us next time when we want to answer your questions, so send them to us at office@GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com.